When people hear the name Jazz Jennings, they often think of courage, strength, and inspiration. From a very young age, Jazz showed the world who she was, even when society was not ready to accept her truth. But behind Jazz's story, there has always been another voice, one that has carried just as much weight, though often quietly in the background. That voice belongs to her mother, Jeanette Jennings. For years, Jeanette stood strong as the protector of her daughter, helping her navigate through school challenges, public scrutiny, and even hate directed toward their family. She became the face of unconditional love, always smiling and standing beside Jazz in interviews, on television, and in their everyday lives. Yet, there was another side of her story, one that people rarely heard. Jeanette has now spoken openly about what it really means to raise a transgender child in the spotlight. And the truth she shared was not filled with scandal or regret, but with the raw, honest fears and emotions of a mother who only wanted her child to be safe, happy, and loved. This is not just the story of Jazz Jennings, it is also the untold journey of Jeanette, a mother who has carried both the hope and the heavy burdens of her daughter's very public life. Jeanette and her husband, Greg, were raising 4 children. In Florida, living what seemed like a typical middle-class life. Their home was full of the usual chaos, kids running around, laughter spilling from the living room, homework battles at the dinner table. From the outside, their family appeared no different than the neighbors around them. But inside, something was happening that would change their lives forever. Their youngest child, born biologically male, began showing signs of being different even before speaking in full sentences. At just 15 months old, Jazz preferred playing with dolls, draping herself in her mother's clothes, and insisting on things that were considered feminine. This was not a passing phase. Every day, Jazz gravitated toward what felt natural to her, and by age 3, she was correcting people who called her a boy. She became upset when forced to wear boys' clothes and firmly declared her identity as a girl. At first, Jeanette and Greg thought it might just be curiosity, something their child would grow out of, but as time went on, it only became stronger. Seeking answers, they spoke to doctors and specialists, and eventually, they learned about gender dysphoria, a medical condition where someone's gender identity does not match the sex they were assigned at birth. Jazz was diagnosed in 2003, at a time when society barely understood transgender issues. There were no guidebooks, no online communities, and very little support. It was uncharted territory for Jeanette and Greg, yet they made a life-changing decision. No matter what, they would support Jazz fully. That decision became the foundation of everything that followed, shaping their family's journey in ways they could never have imagined. Supporting Jazz at home was one thing, but the outside world was another challenge entirely. When Jazz started school, Jeanette and Greg hoped that acceptance would come naturally, but reality proved much harsher. From the very first day, Jazz faced discrimination. Some classmates mocked her, others whispered behind her back, and many excluded her from games and group activities. Even teachers seemed uncertain of how to treat her. But the hardest struggle came with something as basic as using the bathroom. Jazz was not allowed to use the girls' restroom, and the boys' restroom was a place of fear and discomfort for her. Each trip to the bathroom became a painful experience, leaving Jazz embarrassed and anxious. Jeanette, seeing her daughter suffer, tried reaching out to the school. She requested meetings, asked teachers for support, and pleaded with the principal to help create a safer environment. But her concerns were often brushed aside, with vague promises and no real solutions. Frustrated, Jeanette and Greg decided to take matters into their own hands. They contacted a local newspaper anonymously, hoping that shedding light on the issue would force the school to act. The article gained attention, and soon the school had no choice but to listen. Backed by doctors, lawyers, and experts, Jeanette and Greg fought for their daughter's rights. After a long and emotional battle, Jazz was finally allowed to wear girls' clothes to class and use the girls' restroom. It was a victory, but not without scars. For Jeanette, the experience solidified her role as Jazz's fiercest defender. Yet, behind her brave face, She carried silent fears and doubts, questions she couldn't always share. She knew she had to be strong for Jazz, but privately, she wondered if she was doing everything right. The Jennings family's private struggles soon became public when Jazz appeared on national television for the first time. At just 6 years old, she was invited to share her story on The Oprah Winfrey Show. And later, in a groundbreaking interview with Barbara Walters on 2020's, for many viewers, this was the first time they had ever seen a transgender child openly sharing their truth. When asked, "Are you a boy or a girl?" Jazz's simple reply, "I am definitely a girl," touched hearts across the nation. Her innocence and clarity made a lasting impression. Families across America, some of whom had children facing the same struggles, reached out to the Jennings family, finally feeling less alone. For Jeanette, however, the decision to allow her daughter to appear on national television was not made lightly. She worried about how the world might treat Jazz, and insisted that Barbara Walters be the one to handle the story, trusting her to portray Jazz with dignity and respect. The interviews changed everything. Jazz's story brought hope to many, but it also brought criticism and backlash. While Jazz smiled for the cameras, Jeanette absorbed much of the hate-reading, cruel online comments, receiving hurtful emails, and even dealing with threats against her family. She kept her pain quiet, focusing on protecting Jazz, but inside she was carrying the weight of the world. Even then, she knew that one day she would tell the deeper truth about what those years were really like, not the polished version seen on TV, but the raw emotions of a mother fighting for her child's right to exist. In 2015, the Jennings family entered an even bigger spotlight with their reality show, IAmJazz. On TLC, the series followed Jazz through her teenage years, documenting her friendships, school life, medical journey, and emotional struggles. For many viewers, it was the first time they saw a transgender teenager's life portrayed openly on television. The show broke barriers and was praised for its honesty and representation. But with visibility came even harsher backlash. Online, trolls attacked the family daily, accusing Jeanette and Greg of being irresponsible parents. Hate-filled messages flooded their inboxes, and right-wing groups publicly criticized them. One well-known critic, Derek Dillard from another reality TV family, even mocked Jazz on social media, misgendering her repeatedly. The cruelty was not just online. Jazz received death threats, and the family's safety was at times in question. Through it all, Jeanette never wavered. She stood beside her daughter, publicly defending her and absorbing the criticism so that Jazz could focus on simply being a teenager. Jeanette took on internet bullies, challenged false stories, and constantly reminded the world of Jazz's humanity. Yet, the pressure was heavy. The cameras showed a supportive, smiling mother, but they didn't always capture the nights filled with worry, the emotional toll of constant hate, or the quiet tears shed behind closed doors. For Jeanette, the truth was simple: she wasn't a perfect parent or a superhero. She was just a mother, scared but determined, doing everything she could to keep her daughter safe. As the years went by, Jazz transitioned into adulthood, and Jeanette faced one of the hardest challenges any parent experiences: learning to let go. Jazz enrolled at Harvard University, a huge milestone in her life, but also a moment of fear. For Jeanette, she worried about Jazz's safety, about whether people at college would accept her, and about how Jazz would handle the pressures of being both a student and a public figure. During this time, Jazz also went through major personal changes, including losing over 100 pounds and openly talking about her struggles with binge eating and mental health. She showed strength, but she also revealed vulnerability, reminding everyone that even public figures have private battles. It was during this season that Jeanette decided to finally share her own truth in a joint interview with Jazz for People magazine. Speaking candidly, Jeanette admitted that she still worried constantly about her daughter, even tracking her phone for safety. "I don't think I'll ever completely let Jazz go," she confessed. Her honesty was raw and vulnerable. For years, people had seen her as unshakable, but now she revealed the depth of her fears. Jazz, with grace, responded by telling her mum that it was time to step back, time to let her grow into her own independence. Their exchange captured the reality of many parent-child relationships, the tension between protection and freedom. But it also showed the love that bound them together, a love that no amount of public criticism could break. When Jeanette finally spoke out, the world expected a dramatic confession or hidden scandal. Instead, what she revealed was far more powerful in its simplicity. The truth was that she loved her daughter fiercely, worried about her endlessly, and struggled with letting her grow up. It was not regret. It was not doubt. It was the honest voice of a mother who had spent years fighting battles, both seen and unseen, to protect her child. Jeanette admitted her hopes that Jazz would find passion, love, and someone who cherished her for who she truly was. Jazz, in return, expressed her wish for her mother's happiness and peace. Their story, once framed by the world as controversial, was at its core a universal story of family, love, and resilience. Jeanette's truth was not the secret people anticipated, was the reality of motherhood. Messy, emotional, protective, and unconditional. And in sharing it, she reminded the world that behind every activist, every public figure, and every brave child, there is often a parent carrying fears and sacrifices that no one sees. Today, Jazz continues to inspire as she studies at Harvard, advocates for the transgender community, and navigates life as a young adult. Jeanette, meanwhile, is learning the difficult balance of stepping back while still being present. She knows her protective instincts will never disappear, but she also understands that Jazz must build her own life and future. Together, they continue to share their story, not for fame, but because they know it saves lives. Countless families have found courage through their visibility, and many people have found hope through their honesty. The truth, Jeanette finally told, was not about scandal, it was about love. And in the end, that may be the most powerful truth of all. The Jennings family's story is not just about Jazz or Jeanette. It is about how an entire family learned to stand together through good and bad times. Jazz has 3 older siblings, Ari Griffin and Sandarand. Each of them played an important role in her journey. While many families with transgender children face division or misunderstanding, the Jennings family built a wall of protection around Jazz. They showed her every day that she was not alone. This kind of family support is rare, but it is one of the main reasons why Jazz was able to grow into a confident and outspoken young woman. Her siblings treated her like a normal sister, not someone different. This gave her the Jeanette and Greg, as parents, also had to make sacrifices. They chose to go public with Jazz's story, knowing that it would bring both support and criticism. By doing this, they helped millions of other families see that they were not alone. Parents from around the world wrote letters, thanking them for sharing their story. This shows how personal stories can inspire and change society. While not every parent may choose to be so public, the Jennings family's openness helped create awareness about transgender children and the importance of unconditional love. Even with strong family support, Jazz could not escape the judgment of society. Being on television from such a young age meant that millions of people had opinions about her life. Some supported her, while others sent cruel messages. Social media, in particular, became a place of both encouragement and hate. For a teenager already trying to find her identity, this was a heavy burden. Many people forget that Jazz was just a child when she became famous. While other kids her age were worried about school, homework, or friends, Jazz was carrying the weight of being a public figure. Jeanette often expressed worry about this side of Jazz's fame. She knew that words on the internet could cut deep, even if they came from strangers. At times, she wished she could shield Jazz from all of it. But she also realized that hiding was not the answer. Jazz wanted to use her voice to help others. And with that, came responsibility. Jeanette's role, then, was to guide her daughter through the noise and remind her of the love surrounding her. This shows how complicated parenting can be when your child is living such a public life. It is not just about protecting them, it is about teaching them how to stay strong and true to themselves. One of Jazz's proudest moments was being accepted